What Ukrainian non-fiction books are available in English? Why is Ukrainian non-fiction important to read for those who want to understand Ukraine, Eastern Europe, and Russia's war against Ukraine? Why has documenting wartime reality become so important for today's Ukrainian literature? You're listening to the Explaining Ukraine podcast. Explaining Ukraine is a podcast by UkraineWorld, a multilingual media about Ukraine. My name is Volodymyr Yermolenko. I'm a Ukrainian philosopher, chief editor of UkraineWorld, and president of PEN Ukraine. In this episode, I speak to Iryna Baturevych, co-founder and development director of Chitomo.com, a Ukrainian media about books and literature. Before we start, let me remind you that UkraineWorld is brought to you by Internews Ukraine, one of Ukraine's largest media NGOs. You can support our work at patreon.com/UkraineWorld. You can also support our volunteer trips to the frontline areas at PayPal, ukraine.resisting@gmail.com. You can find these links in the description of this episode. This episode is produced in partnership with Ukrainian Book Institute. So let's start. Iryna Baturevych, welcome to this podcast.
Hello, thank you for inviting me.
So we decided to talk about Ukrainian literature, not just Ukrainian literature, but Ukrainian non-fiction literature. And of course, during the war, the non-fiction becomes one of the major genres of literature, one of the most important ones. Would you share this opinion?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for Ukraine now, it's not only popular genre, but it's also one of the most possible for now, because we know that many writers who've been writing fiction literature, they just can't reflect on the events. They can't have this safe space for creativity. Therefore, they are just trying to keep their memories, and they are trying to reflect on the events, on the current events, in the format of non-fiction. And it's understandable, totally understandable, and it's super important for now. But if we will think about it, Ukrainian publishers, I think over the last maybe 5, maybe 10 years, they've been trying to sell the rights for Ukrainian nonfiction abroad, but it was not really successful. And now we can see that finally Ukrainian nonfiction books, they are reaching the international market and international audience, which is also quite essential for us, for Ukrainian culture. And now, before, you remember, it was like this idea that, oh, your experience is too local, maybe it won't be necessarily understandable for our local audiences. But now in 2023, 2024, I think even major publishers, like, these big 5 publishers, they have suddenly announced plans to release Ukrainian nonfiction literature. And I think it's a sign of like this shift in interest and recognition of this genre, and of course Ukrainian war literature mainly in this time. Yeah.
There are many fiction authors who start writing non-fiction. For example, we can even think about poets who are have been documenting war crimes. Of course, the first example is Victoria Melina, about whom I think we will talk more in this podcast. But there is, for example, Miroslav Layuk, who is a poet and a prose writer, who wrote a non-fiction about Bakhmut.
Yes.
There is Alexander Mekhet, who already was a non-fiction writer before the full-scale war, but who published a very strong non-fiction book about which we will also talk. And I also see in Ukrainian poets and prose writers this really trend to rather document, to think that literature is not only about storytelling, it's not only about fantasy, it's not only about even working with your own memories, but sometimes it's a documenting tool. It's a tool to document experiences, crimes, and many other things. So why do you think this trend?
I would just add a few thoughts on that, because I think it's not only documentation; it's also a try sometimes even to preserve some cultural heritage, like Alexander Savchuk is doing, right? It's also creating the background of for understanding fiction literature. It's a try to know each other better. I mean, within Ukraine, among Ukrainians of different experiences, right, and different backgrounds, but also among people worldwide, right? And because keeping people in this distrust to each other and keeping them apart is one of the tools of totalitarian governments. And I think it's also important for us to share this experience for being understood by different people. And it's also quite important to maybe say that this type of literature can fight against propaganda, because we know that there are lots of fake news, and there are many like attempts to show this situation from like really propagandistic point of view. So I think there are numerous way how like numerous reasons why people are doing that. But absolutely true what you are saying, that documenting is one of the most important thing for each of us. And what is interesting, I've heard I visited virtually this presentation by Serhiy Plokhy, and even him as a historian, he told that he can't avoid reacting and reflecting on these events right now, even despite we know that historians are trying to take this distance to understand the historical events and their meaning. And but we know that, by the way, today is the date of the release date of his latest book. I think it's Chernobyl Roulette, that is published by W. Norton. And he's actually publishing this book right now, even despite it's not. I think it's something between like history and nonfiction. Um, and what he's saying is also important, that he wants to reflect and to gather these evidences right now, because our memory and the memory of witnesses, it maybe doesn't serve you well in these moments. I think it's blocking many events that we are willing to forget, like Alexander Mekhed was writing at the end of his Language of War, that also was released recently, that you want to forget, but you need to keep that in your memories, and you need to share these stories, and you need to share them not only among Ukrainians but worldwide, because these crimes should be known, and they should be documented, and at the end they should be punished.
Thank you for mentioning Serhiy Plokhy. For our listeners, let me say that one of the recent episodes, is with Serhiy Plokhy, which we recorded in the same room in which I'm sitting right now today in Penn, Ukraine. But generally, we have at Ukraine World three podcasts with Serhiy Plokhy on different subjects. One of it is before the full scale invasion, about the Ukrainian history, but the most recent one is also very, very interesting. You mentioned this forgetting story, and I think that it's a Ukrainian history and Ukrainian memory is a very paradoxical thing, because it seems sometimes that we are living in a culture of amnesia, of forgetting, because there are so many places of which people don't remember anything. If we take the whole culture of shtetls, Jewish shtetls in the western and central Ukraine, if we take lots of local names that have been erased by the Soviet and previously Russian imperial propaganda, But at the same time, if you think about it, you understand that, well, the past sometimes was so horrible that people would rather forget this, because otherwise they would not survive. And here, your point is very interesting and important, because mm, maybe, well, it's a duty to continue to write about it and continue to speak about it, because if you don't put it on the paper now, your psyche will be just unable to remember it, because you cannot just live with these memories and with these experiences. Maybe this is also the function of this nonfiction writing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just I remember the Dom's Dream Kingdom by Victoria Melina. It's her fiction novel, and it also saying a lot about memory. And I think this book should be definitely translated into many languages. I know that we are speaking now about non-fiction literature, but I think this is something that giving us and everybody who is reading fiction literature these keys to understand what our memory is about. I wanted also to share one story uh, about about the movies that are popping up now for international audience, possibly with numerous streaming services. And recently, I've been to this movie by Iryna Baturevych. It was a very nice movie that was based on Artem Chekh novel, and it was Felix and Me. But I remember that the name in English is much better. Let me remember how it was. It's, I think, paper, scissors, and grenade, or something like that. And I remember that people, the local audience who visited this movie, they came out of from the cinema and they told, "Wow, we haven't expected like to have this movie. It's quite impressive." And I asked, "Oh, what was? How do you think it was? What was it about?" And my friends, my local friends, they told, "Oh, it's just about this weird family that lived in Ukraine, and it's interesting to see how you guys lived and in what decorations." And I was pretty much shocked because I think that many people they don't have this background knowledge of what was happening in Ukraine, and maybe this this message about the country that is growing up and the young boy who is growing up. It was not recognized. It was not accepted in that way that I thought it will be accepted. And I thought that the topic of war that Ukraine is coming through, is going through right now, it was so obvious that people should understand that it's about the war topic too. So I think that if people would read more books like Alexander Mihad wrote, like Illia Ponomarenko, just published in Bloomsbury. I will tell you how it was. Ukrainian historical literature. I think this gap won't be there, and we would have more understanding of other cultural products. Let's say, let's put it in this way. And we really need this literature. But I was wondering about the catalog that was published by the Ukrainian Book Institute about non-fiction literature that was published over the last 2 years, as far as I remember. And I was quite impressed that history books, I think it was less history books than non-fiction about war. And for me, it was impressive because this war is really documented so well in so many different formats, starting from the diaries, historical books that are already emerged, I think, and also local history books. It's also very interesting. I understand that many of them they were published now during the full-scale invasion, but they were written a little bit before this invasion. And this is something that we were late with. I'm pretty sure. And actually, Katerina Zarembo is also saying, maybe with the help of the characters of her book that actually is going to be published soon, she's saying that we were late with all of our reportage. We were late with all of our grassroots initiatives. We need to have maybe 10 years more, and that these these events, the war would never happen to us. And I'm pretty sure that it's true, because all of these books we are mentioning now, they are showing this, um, the, the the transformations that Ukraine went through on its way of growing up, let's say, on its way of fighting for independence. And this is something that we should share, because the grassroots initiatives that Katerina Zarembo is explaining in her book, the absolutely amazing cultural movements, I think all of this is just showing that Ukraine was so much, first of all, decentralized already, that Ukraine was quite ready for it. It was a great example of the democracy. And all of these books there just helping us to understand what was happening at that moment of the time, and what we could have if this war would never happen.
Yes, and let's probably touch upon these books in particular that you mentioned.
Yeah,
I would like to
yeah.
start. I would like to start maybe with the books that you mentioned by Ilya Ponomarenko.
Mm,
I will show how it was. Ilya is has become a very well-known journalist. He's been working for Kyiv Independent, if I'm not mistaken, and then I think he's the most popular, one of the most popular voices on Twitter among Ukrainian journalists on X platform. I haven't seen this book yet, but maybe you could tell me more about it.
Yeah, I think that like the first thing that I would love to say, that it was published by Bloomsbury, which is very very well known publishing house. And yeah, it's not a big five publisher, but it's pretty big. And even the fact that this book was published there, it shows that it's a worldwide wide recognition of his talent and of Ilya's influence. Yeah, he was. I think he was a defense and security reporter, firstly at the Kyiv Post, and he's also a co-founder of Kyiv Independent. Yeah, and I found some information that really people are saying that he's the second, the most influential person from Ukraine after Zelensky. I'm not sure if it's true or not, because we have different research. But about Twitter, yes, or X platform, is for sure. So he wrote about how it was, as the title of the book is saying. And he started his narration from 2021. So he made this step back to show how journalists were working with this topic, that the invasion is coming. And it's interesting to make this step back and to remember the news that were coming, and the news that Ukraine and the world maybe just missed. Because when you have this news feed, it's just moving so fast, and it's hard to understand what is really what has sense and what's not. So, and now I think when you are a reporter, you need to, of course, you need to have these high standards of journalism, and you shouldn't give your opinion on many things that are happening, right? Because you are trying to balance as a professional. But in the format of the book, I think as a journalist, you can analyze what was happening before, where it's moving, and you can also rely on the so many opinions of people that you met on your way. I think that Ilya is really dealing well with this task, and I like that. So the book, I think it's like 18 chapters, and mostly it's based around the events around Kyiv, like a center, like a capital of Ukraine. That nobody was expecting that it would be under the threat, even despite of all of the disturbing news we had, even despite all of the journalists were quite aware of the situation from the side of Russia and Belarus. But but what we can say now, we didn't expect. We were not that sure that these events are going to happen. So I think this book is quite important read, because it's first of all it's very personal story. Of course, Ilya Ponomarenko is explaining the situation still as a journalist, but he's adding this personal context about how it was, how it felt to live in Kyiv before the war, how beautiful it was, and how many democratical processes were on. How Ukrainian civil society was reacting on Zelensky, on the events that were happening in our political scene. And it's also showing that nobody is perfect, and we can say this about Ukrainian political powers, let's say, and Ukrainians by themselves. It contains lots of self-criticism, but at the same time, it's a powerful message to the world, with this baseline of we should be more aware of with whom we are dealing with, yeah. And it's a nice example of first of all journalism, and I'm expecting more books by Ilya Ponomarenko that are going to come. He gave this very throughout of the whole book, he's giving this one metaphor, let's say, that Russia is acting as a street thug, and I think it's pretty good answer to all of political questions, to all of the guess how Russia will react, should we negotiate with Russia, and so on. So it's I think it's quite nice piece of writing, and I strongly recommend this book to everyone who is trying to understand the real situation without, uh, this pathetic ambience. I think it's
Good.
pretty great.
Yeah. Let's move forward and try to also talk about other books. And another book that we might talk about is already mentioned A Language of War by Alexander Mehmed. In Ukrainian, it's called Pozivny для Yova, the call sign for Job, but Job meaning
Yeah.
the ancient testament Job, the prophet who lost everything but hasn't lost his faith. And I think personally it's one of the best books about this war. And this book has received last year's Shevelov Prize for the best essays book by Pen Ukraine. And frankly speaking, I have a podcast with Alexander in Ukrainian. Those of you who um, have the knowledge of Ukrainian can listen to this podcast. It's a very hard reading book because it's so much very true. And Alexander, this metaphor of Job is not also it's a necessary metaphor because of his own life. So can you tell me more about this book and your impressions
Yeah,
of it?
I must agree, Volodymyr, that it's really hard to read, especially for maybe Ukrainians. But it's exactly the right book for international audience, I think, especially right now, because it contains deeply emotional parts. And Alexander is actually great narrator. He is a perfect maybe character, who is first of all it's a first hand experience, right? It's not just some writer who is sitting and I don't know, browsing through internet, finding an interesting stories, or meeting people and trying to report. He is the one who, first of all, his house in Hostomel was under occupation. He experienced this occupation after his house was destroyed, unfortunately, and him and his wife they fled from Hostomel, and he had this experience of we can say internally displaced person or refugee. Um, but after he's joining Ukrainian armed forces, and so all of these experiences that Alexander is coming through, I think it's something that make this book, first of all, very very touching, very emotional, and he is able to explain these events through his experience also as a writer. And he gives these important analogies with executed Renaissance, for instance, with everything that already had happened to Ukrainians. And I also like that he's giving the voice to other witnesses, like Ukrainian artists, like Ukrainian militarians, and it's very very touching that he's also giving the voice to the people who are not with us anymore, those who died fighting for Ukraine, like his friend Onisko, and many others. I think the most powerful story is this blue one, white one, about other refugees who didn't make it to get out from Bucha, Irpin, this triangle of death and horrible crimes made by Russians, and their life before the invasion and what had happened after. And I googled these images of this van again. Of course, everybody saw these pictures from the news from Bucha and Irpin in 2022. But I also looked through the exhibition that took place in Berlin, and when they showed the van among the artistic community and among the just people from Berlin. I think it's a very important chapter of the book, and it's a very important chapter of Ukrainian fight. Um, I would recommend to read this book to everybody, especially if you are living abroad, if you are not Ukrainian, because it gives so much context and it's explaining so many things. So definitely, it's a must read. And it was published, I think, in Allen Lane, and it's also an imprint by Penguin Random House. So it's pretty accessible, and I'm sure it has this global distribution, so it's you can buy it anywhere. So I think it's definitely one of the best books on the current events. The other book maybe we should mention is The Occupation, that is coming by Ukrainer Publishing House later this year. I think it should come this winter. And this book is by Bogdan Lohovenenko and the team of Ukrainer. And I'm really happy that it was shortlisted as a nominee for a Peterson Award. I hope that one of Ukrainer's book will win this year. But this is an extremely interesting example because the Ukrainer team, they are the team of volunteers who were exploring Ukraine, and firstly these expeditions that they were more about exploring Ukrainian cultural heritage, Ukrainian communities, Ukrainian culture and crafts all over Ukraine, in different very remote places. And you're meeting people from villages, from cities, starting from Kharkiv Oblast and ending in Crimea or like Western Ukraine, Eastern Ukraine. So it was very interesting. And because of this project, I think we know so many interesting people, so many people who were trying to make this positive impact on their communities, their local communities. But now all of a sudden, the Ukrainian team turned to be the team who've been documenting the Russian war crimes. And I think it was this immediate and very natural shift for them to respond to quite like immediately, right? And these expeditions to different little villages, cities that were deoccupied. They put it in a chronological order, and we are moving together with this team to discover like to discover the stories of people who experienced occupation. Uh, and I was quite impressed of bravery of these people because one of the militarians who were guiding them, he's asking Bogdan Lohanenko, the author of this book, and the team, please like follow in my footsteps because everything is mined here. And actually, you can say this about all of their way from Kyiv to the north and to the east of Ukraine, to the south of Ukraine, because the trip is quite dangerous and they're meeting people whose bravery is really, it deserves to be in many, many books. And I hope that this book will also give so many material for those who are looking for the characters for their future books, maybe not now, but later, because ordinary Ukrainians showed such a strength and they reacted on the invaders in such a way that I'm putting myself in this situation and I'm asking myself, could I do the same? Like Pan Yuri from Moskali, for instance, could I be the same brave? And I don't have answer for this question. And we see the characters that we met through the expeditions of Bogdan and the team, the Ukrainian team, when they were just craftsmen, when they were just these city activists who were trying to create museums, to create cultural events on their for their local audiences, for their citizens. And now we can see them in absolutely different roles, like people who are the witnesses of these crimes. And I was extremely impressed, especially by one story from this little town or village, maybe village, Moskali, by Pan Yuri, who Ukrainian readers may already met, as a person who tried to create museums from old abandoned houses. And he was collecting these tools of like agricultural tools that are more than 100 years old, and different types of artifacts to show the history of his region. And during the occupation, you see how these museums actually helped these tools, how they helped them to survive um, the situation when they had no food, for instance, when they have nothing to plant. And this is the story. I think it's deeply moving story when these artifacts are helping people to survive after 100 years. Maybe they helped to survive these people when it was Ukrainian famine, as Pan Yuri, the activist who was doing this, who was taking care of these museums, is saying. So this book is also extremely interesting, and I can't wait when it's going to be available in English. Especially cool that it's going to be published by Ukrainer Publishing House. So we are just waiting.
Let's move forward and touch upon another book which is upcoming, which is also very difficult for us because it's also a book of our friend, but who was killed by Russian missile in last summer, summer 2023. It's Victoria Melina, a Ukrainian poet and Ukrainian prosa writer, whom Iryna already mentioned. And during her work as a documenter of war crimes, she was working together with an organization called Truth Hounds. Uh, just to remind to our listeners, we have a special episode about Victoria, and we have just an episode about her, and we have conversations with people who knew her. Victoria was killed in Kramatorsk in summer, June 2023, 1 year ago, when she was accompanying a group of Colombian writers and diplomats, and they were sitting just in Kramatorsk in a restaurant. Recently, there was an attack on Kramatorsk, an attack on the hotel. Today, we are recording this episode on the 3rd of September. There is a horrible attack on Poltava with now reports about more than 50 people dead. And we can see that these attacks are actually going one after another right now. And all of them on civilian places, all of them on crowds of people. And I'm sure that Russians were specifically targeting this restaurant in Kramatorsk, in which we were, by the way, several times. Ria Pizza, and Victoria was there, and she was killed by a missile. She died a few days after in Dnipro hospital. But the important thing about her is that she was working on a book which is called Looking at Women, Looking at War, about women who were actually documenting war crimes or working in human rights sector or working as writers. And this non-fiction book is unfinished, has been unfinished. And the family of Victoria and her friends have been spending this year after her death to make this book, happening. So we are expecting that it will be published. Maybe Irina, you will tell a few
Yeah,
words about it as well.
it's gonna be published the next year. The publisher Macmillan announced 15th February, as far as I remember. And yeah, I know that this book, War and Justice Diary, looking at women, looking at war, was one of the projects that actually Victoria Melina was talking a lot about, and she was able even to present a little bit a piece of this project during the book forum in Lviv before her death. But I know that by the moment when Victoria was killed, the structure of this book, of this work, it was complete, and her literary agent Emma Shercliffe and the publisher, they knew how the different chapters and the sections would look like. Unfortunately, not all of the chapters were finished, as you mentioned. And I think it was extremely hard decision for the publisher and for her agent how to put it as a book. And I think they did a great job because they decided to leave the body of the text as it was written by Victoria, because it would be fair to do that like Victoria did. And but what they do but what they did though, it's adding the context, adding the footnotes, and adding this translation of the footnotes that Victoria was able to leave on these unfinished pages. But again, without touching it. So I'm also expecting to see this book, and I know that there were, I think, more than 10 heroines. I think it was, of course, Alexandra Matvichuk, one of them, Ukrainian Nobel Peace Prize winner. There were lawyers who Victoria was interviewing. It's Yevgenia Zakrevska and Larisa Denisenko. Of course, journalists like Natalka Humenyuk and Vera Kuriko. So I think it would be a very powerful selection made by Victoria. It would be really important book that we should all read, I think. And I haven't seen the manuscript, but I'm pretty sure that everything that Victoria was doing, it was always done 100% perfect, and even more, if we can say so. So yeah, unfortunately, this book will be presented without her.
Yes, and this is for our listeners. This is an element of our reality. We publish books by people who are no longer with us. And for example, the example of Maxim Krivtsov, a poet who published his first poetry book, and he just held it in his hands, and he was killed while he was on the front line. He was a soldier, and Boris Humenyuk, who is considered to be missing in battle, the profound, very very strong poetry. He was not young. He is not young. Maybe let's put it in this way, but also considered to be missing. Volodymyr Vakulenko, of course, who's also non-fiction. Diary have been published thanks to Victoria. This mystical story how she found this diary in the garden of his father's, and how Victoria actually passed away on July 1st on Vakulenko's birthday. So there are many, many such things tragically, and for our listeners to give you an idea that actually many, many people on the front line are writers, or they are artists, or they haven't been writers before, but they became writers during this war or during the previous phase of this war in 2014. So we also need to understand that those who are writers in Ukraine are not only those established writers whom you know, who are being published in other languages. Many of them are just writing in the trenches, literally, and maybe they're writing in non-fiction as well. Another book that we might talk about is already mentioned Katarina Zarembo and her book about Donbass, which is called Schid Ukrainskого Sonця, the rise of the Ukrainian sun, about the eastern Ukraine. And for our listeners, you will be surprised by. But we also have an episode with Katarina in this podcast. So I refer to you a wonderful episode with very interesting author who wrote a book how basically Ukraine was, how the east of Ukraine is actually a very important fact of Ukrainian history, both the long history and the recent history. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about this book as well.
Yeah, I really love this one. And The Rise of the Ukrainian Sun is one of those local history books that was maybe, I think it was there were just a few books of local history on the Ukrainian market before. And now we can see the increase in number of titles of this genre, and each representative of each region, either journalist or writer, try to reflect on the history of their region. And I think this local history is very important for understanding this diversity of Ukrainians, the diversity of Ukrainian communities, diversity of views and political views as well. cultural life and diversity uh, of um, of people who are creating this cultural life. And to be honest, I discovered many names for myself that came from exactly this region. Let's say Donetsk and Luhansk region, that some name Donbass, but I think it's not the correct way to name this region. And I think that Katerina Zarembo is actually helping to understand many other Ukrainian novels, like, for instance, like Daughter. It is a novel that is written by Tamara Duda. She won Shevchenko Prize recently, and this novel may be taken, uh, quite complicated, I think, without the deeper context of what was happening in the region before. And I think Katerina is giving this subtitle of the Ukrainian edition, that she's writing about Donbass and Donetsk and Luhansk region, that Russia, sorry, Russia is willing you would never discover. So uh, she's giving her impression that is really similar to my impression when I was reading this book. She's saying that each time she encountered a new story, discovering new people, she was like filled with amazement. She was saying wow, wow, wow. But at the same time, this feeling was mixed for her with this sense of shame. And I think it's pretty much about me, because I haven't visited the region, and I think many people before 2014 uh, didn't pay enough attention to what was happening in the cultural life of Donetsk and Luhansk. And it's very interesting to see, especially now when we know about, for instance, isolation. It was firstly, it was a huge factory that was turned into the cultural center, and the name of it was actually reflecting how the region felt, how how the cultural community felt back then. They were in isolation. Maybe their voices were not heard as much as they should be heard. And after we know the story of Stanislav Aseev, who explained, who wrote a book about his experience in Izolatia, which was not a place for culture anymore, and which was turned into a torture camp. So I think these different levels of history moves us to the personal stories of people. And I think this is something very powerful about this book, and about this region that gave us so many talents, like Luba Yakamchuk, for instance, like many other people, amazing journalists and amazing people who are now still documenting this war, and I'm sure we will hear about them again.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but there are a few other books that you wanted to mention, and let me ask you to briefly mention them and tell a few words. One of them is obviously Pavlo Kazarin's book, The Wild West of Eastern Europe, and maybe some others.
Yeah, for sure. Pavlo Kazarin's book is really a nice read for those who like this sincere and story without any decoration. Kazarin was born in Crimea, and I think he's a very interesting character who moved firstly. from Crimea to Ukraine. He's working as a journalist. He's quite well known in Ukraine, and now he's serving in the Ukrainian armed forces. And he's reflecting on the events that had happened back in 2014. And this book was actually written before the full-scale invasion. And I think even in foreword, in many forewords of many Ukrainian books that were written in this period, 2020, 2021, the writers are giving additional forewords. For example, like in a book of Severodonetsk by Svetlana Slavska, or Kazarin's book, and they're explaining how they were also how they were participating in the events that were happening before, and how the all of our reality changed, firstly after 2014 and then after 2022. So I strongly recommend this book. And I just want to briefly mention those books that are not translated yet, and I truly believe that they should. First one is Severodonetsk by Svetlana Slavska that I just mentioned, and this is one of the best reportage book about Severodonetsk. It's a small town, not far from Kharkiv, but actually everybody is thinking that it's somewhere closer to Donetsk. It's much, much more on the north. And Svetlana Oslavska, as a journalist, as a reporter, she was born there and she spent 17 years of her life there. So she's able to give this view on the city, and she's able to express the stories. And she left everything like she wrote in 2020 and 2021, because she was sure that it's impossible to rewrite each word in the past tense. And many of people she met in Severodonetsk, now they are killed, or their destiny is unknown. And it's also very sincere story about the city and about the citizens of this story of this city. And only one reportage was written in 2022, after the full-scale invasion. And she's adding this story as the story of a lady that left Severodonetsk after occupation. Not after occupation, but during the occupation. She was one of those who were lucky enough to to survive and to go to Germany. And I think this story gives so much hope and so much belief that Ukraine will resist. That I think it makes this book uh, very very optimistic, I would say. But at the same time, it brings lots of grief and lots of stories. It's a reflection on the city that is never would never be the same, that is lost now. So I think that's one book. And another book is The History of Crimea by Gulnara Abdullaeva. I think this book is worth mentioning because it's the first history book on Crimea that is written by Crimean Tatar historian and quite well-known Ukrainian and Crimean Tatar TV host and podcaster now, who is sharing the very very in a popular way the story of Crimea, starting from the beginning of civilization and ending with current events. So I think this book that is the story that is told by Crimean Tatars now is pretty much important, and I would love to see more books like this to be translated and to be published for sure. And I hope that the program of the Ukrainian Book Institute maybe could be helpful in this. And if any publishers or literary agents are listening to us right now, I hope that maybe you'll use this opportunity, apply to Translate Ukraine program, or maybe just try to negotiate with the publishers directly and buy rights for these books, because they're truly amazing, and I believe they will find their audience abroad.
Thank you, Irina. Thank you for this conversation, and I fully share with you the idea that Ukrainian nonfiction should be really widely translated all over the world, and not only nonfiction, of course, fiction as well, in poetry and drama. There are many things, good things happening in the Ukrainian literature, and not necessarily they are directly related to war, but of course, war experience is a formative experience for us, and it's an experience of mourning, it's an experience of tragedy, but it's also an experience of strength, of resistance, of resilience, of bravery, and many other things. Thank you, Iryna Baturevych, for this conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you for talking about that and raising these important points.
This was a podcast Explain Ukraine by UkraineWorld, a multilingual media about Ukraine. My name is Volodymyr Yermolenko. I'm a Ukrainian philosopher, chief editor of UkraineWorld, and president of PEN Ukraine. My guest today was Iryna Baturevych, co-founder and development director of Chitomo.com, a Ukrainian media about books and literature. You can support our work at patreon.com/UkraineWorld. You can also support our volunteer trips to the front lines at PayPal, Ukraine.resisting@gmail.com. You can find these links in the description of this episode. Stay with us and stand with Ukraine.